Yeah.
We're now officially live. So let's post this link up. I'll post it. Well, I have to sign into Meetup to do this.
Okay.
Let's see. I think I have to sign in, which requires my phone for my password. And I think it's actually going to be easier to just hand type this in. We got some nice dead space on our YouTube video.
Nice.
Always good. You know, I like the gutter aesthetic.
Yeah.
You gotta wait for the good stuff aesthetic.
Yeah.
6V JQ HT PB G. Is that an L or U? Okay, we'll find out. Cool. So you posted that to your Twitter?
Twitter, and I posted it to the Facebook group, and I posted it to my Facebook in general.
Let me just make sure the link link I posted. Ooh, creepy. I'm meta watching us.
Oh my God.
That's eerie.
There's a real MC Escher effect we could achieve right there.
Okay, this is actually a really squeaky chair, and I'm right near the mic, so I think I'm going to get a less comfortable but less interrupting chair.
Excellent plan.
Because I tend to roll around a lot, all that sort of crap. Okay.
Okay. So how do you want to do this? You want to do just a real quick, I'm Chelsea, this is who I am. I'm Mo, this is who I am. And this is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I got some plans for it because I'm going to write up a little structure so that anyone who wants to, who's into decentralization, can do one of these.
Sounds great.
The purpose, I'll pretend we have an official beginning right now.
Okay.
This is the first instance of trying out something called Decentralization Dialectics. It is intended to be sort of an inverse of the classic interview podcast style, wherein someone outside of the fervent, excited little core of the decentralization movement, who is an expert in their own field, who has, lots of their own organic understanding of the issues that arise in trying to have a decentralization revolution. Right. Not interrogates, because interrogates is a rather aggressive word, but basically comes and asks exploratory questions based on their suspicions of this super utopian perspective to the techno-utopian decentralization perspective, which is one that I hold. And if this takes off and different people do it, maybe people who are super like crypto capitalists who are not idealistic and airy can then have idealists from outside of the community interrogate them about their particular slant. Yeah. But for now, we are currently streaming live from Decontrol, a lovely decentralization enthused basement in Vancouver, British Columbia. Got some cool folks hanging out here, and we're just gonna roll with this and have a solid chat. The questions that Mordechai provided are very deep and thorough philosophical and political questions that have plagued humankind for a long time. So we'll maybe start with the first and see how far we get, keeping it tight within an hour.
Okay.
I am Chelsea Palmer. I am super, super pumped about decentralization and blockchain related technologies, and it's drives my whole life, and I'm a fan of critical theory, and I'm a fan of what goes on in the ivory tower of academia. I'm not a fan of what an ivory tower it is, hence I left and entered tech and do weird event and performative and music-based forms of education now. So Mordechai, you are the one who really inspired this to happen.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mordecai Martin, or Mo Martin. I'm a writer and podcaster and a few other things. I live in Mexico City. I was based in New York for a long time. My background is in Jewish studies. I'm religion and history of religion. And I guess in so much that I have focuses beyond that, I have backgrounds in early modernism, right? Like 16th century, early modern history of the book as an idea. And yeah, I and Chelsea know each other from our first college. I do not think it was either of our last colleges. Our first college, Simon's Rock College of Bard. And we were friends there, and I got to know Chelsea's enthusiasm and passion for a better world, and share it. And then life went on. We took part in life in different directions. And then Chelsea started showing up with all these hashtags on Facebook of like hashtag decentralization, hashtag cryptocurrency, hashtag Bitcoin, hashtag BitDog, and I don't, and I could tell it had something to do with Bitcoin and blockchain, and I read a few Wikipedia pages to have this conversation. Ultimately, what it seemed to come down to is this really fervent belief that tech, right, that information technology, as we're discussing it, right, computers, internet, right, and new ways of distributing and protecting that information, we're going to help somehow achieve this world that Chelsea and I have sort of idealistically been believing in since we were 16 or so, where presumably like oppressive structures like racism and sexism and gender binaries will fall, and other areas that prevent people, borders will be much more permeable, possibly non-existent. Other areas, that keep people unhappy, massive wealth disparities, right, will somehow be solved. These are all things that I believe we agree on, right, Chelsea? That this is the world as we would like it to be.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And you have a belief that this technology can play a vital role in achieving that, and I, for the purposes of this discussion, am much more skeptical of that.
Yes. Understood. And again, we all dive deep into our own passions and perspectives. So most, I'd say, are more skeptical than I on that. And I get down, I get bummed seeing the way that, particularly when it comes to, and I'll break it down a little bit as simply as possible. When it comes to cryptocurrency, the most successful model of decentralized technology right now, Bitcoin being the first example of this. Yes, right. It is built entirely on a financial incentivizing structure. And that is, I believe, one of the reasons that streak throughout human civilization of self-interest and hoarding resources and stuff, the financial incentivization is why it was able to break through. And really, Bitcoin was the first killer app of blockchain. However, I get my heart broken still, like looking at how much, like trying to gauge, okay, what's the percentage of people who are enthusiasts in the blockchain space who on some level really are just enthusiastic about how darn rich they're getting, it is something, there are still the recognizable structures of financial self-interest. But that being said, I guess where I'd start, this is kind of not starting at laying the foundation, but what I would say is, even in the case of you know, the nouveau riche that is being created by cryptocurrency. I like to say my dad is like a civil rights hippie who never gave up his values. And he has warned me about the heartbreak of watching people around you slowly, quote unquote, sell out. We could spend hours unpacking that term. But what I told him that is my deepest hope within this community is, and we see this a bit in all of technology, the upper class that was created by technology, Bill Gates and the like. These are people that, the techno-glitterati, I like to say.
Yeah.
But these are people that increasingly are making their wealth by sticking to their values. Like all of the people who became millionaires off of Bitcoin and more recently Ether, they became wealthy by pursuing this really idealistic vision. So even as that starts to meld and blend in some ways back into consumer culture, get as much stuff as you can mentality, it is still completely underwritten by this really stunning, like genuine social good intention and since we're fabulously wealthy, let's put a good portion of this towards social good initiatives. And again, I'm not a huge fan of Microsoft, but I am a huge fan of the Gates and the Gates Foundation, Gateses and the Gates Foundation. And I don't know if you recall, Mordecai, at Simon's Rock, the only reason I was there was I got the Gates Foundation scholarship. They paid for my entire, I was one of the acceleration to excellence scholars. I really wish I had, been more responsible with that and made my way through. But either way, without them paying, so without them paying, I wouldn't have been, because then the economy crashed after that, so I really wouldn't have been able to go to any university.
Right.
So there is always, it's this this little balance of can we motivate people to get things that they want and to also want to get the world as equal of a place as possible. And I think with what I'm seeing, this is a relatively small scene still. So it's you can kind of begin to know everybody at this stage in a technological global scene. And I see some really great intention. That is entirely anecdotal and cannot be proven in any way.
No, I mean, I'm not looking for statistics here, and my points are equally anecdotal, which is, but let's talk about saturation.
Yes.
Right? Because, the fact of the matter is, tech's liberatory potential is limited by how many people have access to that technology.
That's very true. And we're still working on getting global access to the internet.
Right, exactly. So global access to a free internet commons. And then, that's a different point that I want to make later, which is vulnerability, right? Which is the vulnerability of these so-called internet commons to massive government control, corporate interference, things like that. But before we get into that, let's talk about saturation and what does it mean to have a technology be the main form of liberation when only so many people are going to access that technology?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And I myself struggle with that question, again, going as fundamental as computer hardware access and the internet.
Just have, and also equal hardware access, right? If we keep sending $10, $10 laptops to the developing world, that's great. What about how are they going to compete against me and my, nice big Asus or, your Mac Pro or so on and so forth?
No, you're correct. Blockchain technology, as opposed to, interface access, access to a computer and the internet, which is, as I'm saying, a looming problem that we still need to solve. Blockchain is a protocol for the provenance or provability of data that has been, of sets of records. It's an immutable ledger system. So blockchain is not, the revolution is not aiming to see a blockchain in everyone's hands sort of thing. It's not so much about the market and the world accessing this. It's about demanding that all of our governance structures, our legal structures, and our financial structures operate on blockchain style protocols. Because what we're doing is we're saying we want to see that this is particularly going to be interesting when it comes to voting. A blockchain record system is unalterable and transparent, almost always pseudonymous. So, you know, it's not fully anonymous. At the same time, it's not, oh, Bill over here in Iowa cast this vote, you know.
Right.
But basically, what's interesting about it is we want to demand our representative structures to always use transparent, immutable representation, not figures, but to records. I don't want to keep using records over and over, but essentially to show this money went here and we have these cryptographic verifications of it. It prevents, so it's not so much that blockchain is an end user facing thing as like the bigger goal or as the first place to start, but rather that it is a tool to make fraud nearly impossible within those who claim to speak in our best interests. So it's more,
so this is what I was looking at, and when I was reading the Wikipedia page for blockchain and all, and the Byzantine general problem and all that good stuff. So what you're saying here is we have a way to make the internet, the internet previously was like sand on the beach, right? You build a castle and eventually enough people can wear away at that castle, enough forces wear away at that sand castle that it's unrecognizable. No longer the castle you built. No longer the information you wanted to get out there.
Yeah.
What blockchain is concrete, right? It's a, oh, I'm sorry, have I frozen? No.
No.
Okay. What blockchain is a way to build a permanent structure out of information, right? So that there is a way to verify the truth about the information that is preserved in the blockchain at all time. Is that what I'm getting?
No.
Okay.
Well, there is like you're nailing the immutability, but I don't think that's exactly what the immutability functions like. What it's more like, this is a way complex thing that would never be worth building in real life, but if you're comparing to a sandcastle, it's like a sandcastle where each bit of sand is like named with, in this case, a long cryptographic hash and tracked. So that you can, so
you could reconstruct the sandcastle at any time.
Yeah.
If you had enough patience, you could put each grain back to where it was originally.
And most importantly, you can know when each grain was moved and by what players within the sandcastle building network.
Right. So
that's the main thing is
did the ocean knock this one over, or did the bully who kicked my sandcastle over knock this one over?
Yeah. And then, and mainly an element of this technology that creates that sort of version control, not quite, but that sort of version control system, and underwrites its reliability, is that you've got many models of the same sandcastle. So it's kind of, we have to move even more meta. It's like a bunch of people are building one sandcastle in VR. We're all sitting in our own homes. We're in a VR headset. Now, if one person tries to like radically change the sandcastle, everyone else has their own copy. And God, this is way too complex and unrealistic.
No, this is great. I'm getting this.
It's not. But essentially, so not only can you tell what happens within the system, but but you can tell immediately when when someone's trying to falsify a record. And in fact, with the actual hard tech, it's not even possible. That's my understanding. And that returns to the way this is verified, returns to, we always have to tango with money, self-interest, incentivization in human civilization. Because the way this is all ensured, this like mutually assured destruction, is that it would cost you more resources to attack the Bitcoin. I'll use the Bitcoin blockchain because it's the strongest, and recently has proven to be even stronger than we could ever imagine. But it would cost you more resources to try to attack the structure and commit fraud upon it than you would be able to pull out through an attack. Like, it's inherently disincentivized from attack. It would cost you more. Oh, that's a piece of luggage rolling over our sidewalk.
Excellent.
That sounds like a monster. Yeah, it would cost you more in computing resources than you would be able to extract with any given attack. Right. So again, like that, we need these financial incentivization structures to keep the larger operation of society honest. Because I'm pretty bleeding heart about financial inequity in the world. And the one big change in my ideology entering this scene in the past 2+ years has been, I'm starting to reconcile myself to capitalism as essentially the only operational model we have in our lifetimes that we could tweak to our interests. That kind of leads towards one of your other questions. If you have any more clarifying questions around this, let me know.
No. I think I understand. I mean, right. So then at that point, you and I are really at odds, because I think capitalism is not a structure that is to any individual human being's interests.
That's fair. And I wouldn't fully disagree with that. I think it's the least of all evil in implementable models, not in an ideal world, but in the next 50 years-ish that I'll be alive. Okay. So, yeah. Kind of.
Well, as far as implementable models go, right, that's really hard because, I'll admit I don't have a lot of concrete hope. You know, I separate hope into the concrete and the abstract, right? I don't have any concrete hope that I will see a system other than capitalism in my life, mm-hmm. Right? I hope abstractly that I will. I hope abstractly that, and this is for me where the religion comes in. I believe in these radical changes delivered either through human revolutions or through a divine intervention. Yeah. So, both are what preserve, I preserve both my hope in that that someday every human being will wake up and say, man, I've been a real jerk about this, hoarding resources and, and yeah, like that Family Guy scene, right? The guy who is a serial killer, and then he finds himself alone in a room and he's bored and he sticks himself with a knife and he goes, "Is that what I've been doing? I'm a real jerk."
That's actually Snake in The Simpsons. He's in prison. He's like,
yeah.
What I've been doing, people? I belong in here.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, that's a very good metaphor.
So that's my hope for the human species, that we'll all wake up one day and say, oh, is this what justice looks like? Yes, this is what justice looks like, and we will enact it.
Yeah. I like your sectioning of and this is very much what dialectics as a process is supposed to be. You're clarifying of abstract and concrete hope, and I feel similarly. I share the exact same abstract hope. I've just gotten quite hardened and grisly in my old age. But I do think. See, I'm speaking of capitalism as at this horrifying globalized scale we have. I don't think we're undermining the larger globalized structure of capitalism. Now, where I was excited about your questions in this regard is decentralization is about, it is not about, there are crypto capitalists, there are crypto anarchists, there are crypto socialists.
Right.
So decentralization is about, as I think you were kind of getting at with some of your questions, it's about creating under this larger structure the opportunity for a plurality of smaller systems that are opt-in, so that the global order, we're not going to see the banking system go anywhere, the global banking system go anywhere in our lifetimes, but we can enable, like, as much as I'm not the hugest fan of Timothy Leary, I must admit that turn on, tune in, drop out was a very nice little phrasing.
It's catchy as all hell.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so the possibilities for localized and decentralized, like node self-governance, finally provide us with the ability to opt out and drop out. So what communes have been doing all along, right. What lots of groups have just decided to go their own way, build their own community, and usually that has necessitated building everything from the ground up yourself and having someone who specializes in every piece of community building you need. This would ideally, moving towards more decentralized structures and protocols, would allow there to be a kind of grab and go, flexible, modular approach to that, where you can come in with your community and be able to plug into tools to exchange with other communities, to communicate, to share, but along your own terms. Each group creates its own like interface of, here are our requirements for like ethically doing business with you. So essentially, it really is the view of decentralization, as much as it neither, I was going to say neither confirms nor denies the legitimacy of capitalism. However, cryptocurrency being at the root of most of this, it does kind of, it gives a bolster to capitalist structures. However, the long-term vision is usually, even amongst like fervent and conservative crypto capitalists, is usually very much against what my good friend and compadre Gary LeChance calls terminal consumer culture. The buy things, make yourself happy element that we see rampant in the global north, especially. But ultimately, just creating a space for freedom and autonomy of choice. And that can be a place where socialist communes can thrive, anarchic communities can do what they want. Like, ideally, we're building protective and interoperable umbrellas for that sort of smaller scale freedom.
Okay, that's very interesting to me, and it's very similar to my theories, my personal political ideals, which would be like, let communities create the structures they need to help each other, regardless of the government, right? So like when there's wealth inequality that says, oh, these people can't eat because they don't have the money to buy food, we create communities that say, no, we're a community where all are provided with food, all are provided with housing, so on and so forth. So I understand, and this could be the computing system and the financial system. You're saying that sort of breakaway independence could be based on.
I am certainly hoping so. And I mean, I'm not saying it's not an uphill battle. It definitely is. And one thing I have consistently encountered for 2 years now is human groups they inherently want to re-centralize. It's easier to put someone in charge. So even when, like, the space I'm sitting within has been a successful little non-hierarchically governed community commons for 3 years, but it's, even as we focus so intensely on that, it's really easy to look to the loudest person or the person who shows up the most or whatever, and just be like, oh, they'll probably handle it. I'll just do what they say. Mm-hmm. So it's, I guess, one of my biggest pain points of skepticism about my own values here is, can this be done? Can we truly distribute responsibility and authority in a decentralized manner? Like, can we, it's hard for any of us, like I'm sure any project you've worked on that you've been passionate about, trying to delegate even the simplest thing to someone else, it's hard because you're like, well, will you do it? Is this going to break everything? Yeah. So again, like the human group dynamics start to, that's actually the biggest problem I've encountered is, okay, well, how do we make this real in the world of meat space of the day to day?
Yeah. So that was really another question that I had about the extent of your idealism about these things, because for me, tech, the limitation of tech's liberatory potential, any tech's liberatory potential, the printing press, for God's sake, you know, is gunpowder, whatever you want, you know, is the limitations of the human empathetic experience.
Yeah.
And the human ability to say, yeah, you know what, I did get mine and I want you to have yours.
Yes.
The human ability to say, you know, I can eat a little less or a little less richly or a little less deliciously if you can eat it all, right? You know, so I am interested to hear that you have encountered, you know, real walls or roadblocks to true decentralization in the meat space level.
Yeah. It's actually, I think, if I can, just from, you know, like us, like from always seeing your thoughts online and stuff like that, it makes me think of the struggle that we inherently encounter with faith as well. Is that whole, like it's doubts will arise not just on the feasibility, but on the, like, am I alone in this?
Am I the only one who really thinks that God looks like this and sounds like this and said these things and you know, and wants me to be this kind of person?
Yeah.
And that's hard. Creating community is hard.
Yeah.
And I guess one of my questions was, so Chelsea, do you really believe this tech, you know, that this blockchain technology, can it do that? You know, can it help? Can it make making community easier, or does it just make certain things, you know, certain information technology a little more secure?
I would say yes. To the former, I would say yes, it can make community easier, even through my periods of doubt. And if I may share a current event, a nearly current event that really underlines this for me, this actually reinvigorated my faith and led me to actually completely dive into, okay, I'm a free agent, independent consultant, just I'm going to be traveling, trying to help this movement in whatever way I can.
Right.
So in this technology, in this stage of technology, inevitably there will be problems with code. There will be big snafus. Projects will break down, etc.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, Ether and the Ethereum platform were they second out of the gate in wild success to Bitcoin. Ethereum is similarly structured cryptocurrency, but you can build applications on it. You use smart contracts. It moves beyond, like you can build things into the Bitcoin blockchain, but Ethereum was designed so that we can do more complex interpersonal related and like programming related things with a blockchain. Pretty cool. It really just took off the past year, and like the value of Ether just shot up way quicker comparatively than happened with Bitcoin. Well, I'm not a financial modeler, so I won't get into all that. Because of this the Bitcoin core developers and team were pretty conservative and pretty careful. I think Ethereum's rapid rise over the past couple of years has led to some sort of like huge attack vectors. And so some crazy things have happened along the way. Most recently, one type of wallet in which you could store Ether used this, I don't even know if it's a protocol or what it is. Oh, hey, Tana. Used something called parity. And there was an exploit in it that was discovered by a hacker about 10 days ago, maybe close to 2 weeks, that made it so that you could easily crack into, unlock any wallet made after a certain date. Nice. Now, 3 teams, 3 like projects in this space were hit hard in their parity wallets. Swarm City, Eternity, and Edgeless Casino, I think. I forget the third. Either way, drained. Wallets drained. The response, and particularly the quick response, I think Swarm City was hit first, and Burned, who's like the CEO there, put out the message on the wire. A group of white hat hackers who are good friends with them, led by Griff Green and Jordy from Giveth. These are all people I respect on a personal level and now respect even more from this. They find out, and they had actually been up for a while for a company thing, like they were doing product dev, and they're immediately like, oh my God. And when they analyzed this, when they looked at it technically, they're like, whoa, so pretty much a huge amount, a way bigger amount of money is at risk than what's already been tapped. So they decided to hack all the wallets themselves, all of the vulnerable wallets, and pour that money into paired safe wallets. And hence the white hat group. And they managed to save, when you include the Ether and then the like proprietary tokens for companies that they saved about $200 million US worth of funds over a period of days. They were not sleeping much. I was in a bit of touch with them. And they then tirelessly, and my understanding is this part was even more annoying, getting the money back reliably to each, to each
wallet,
original owner. Now, they did this. What I find most interesting about this, and what really kind of sets this technological field apart, is that they did this, and they're good friends with Swarm City, and they wouldn't have maybe been able to jump on top of this if they hadn't heard so quickly. And during the process, they were also anonymous. They didn't come out under their names until more recently.
Right.
They would have easily, I feel like almost every structure I've seen in society, your friends get ripped off. You would have it's been discussed, maybe the community taking a voluntary haircut off of the rescued funds and donating it back. So they could have easily, these are my buddies, I'll just a little bit here. No, they put so much tireless work into following exactly the structure as it was and they got every single dollar back to all of these organizations. And just like this idea of like this true Robin Hood style ideal of, well, in this case, it's not really Robin Hood because you're not designating the rich or the poor, but it falls along the lines of the most like white hat ethical reading of what code is law means. And I had been kind of, I've been seeing all of this increasing tendency in the cryptocurrency community for all of these companies making up projects that they can do an initial coin offering on and basically get a bunch of money and then not build anything. So I was getting worn down. I was getting depressed. And I see these folks put a week of their own time in to just rescuing the system to keep it in line with their ideals about what it all means. And their ideals are pretty selfless. And on behalf of Swarm City as well, when people came to Swarm City and were offering to donate, Swarm City's response is buy our token and buy into our system. They lost all of the Ether outside of their own economy of the Swarm City token, which is exchanged on their platform for peer-to-peer commerce. And I was talking to them too, and they're like, well, guess we have even more incentive to build an awesome project now, because all we have is our project and our internal token. So just there is, I think if we can buffer these segments of the decentralization community that are so deeply idealistic, then indeed we can, what you were talking about, we can highlight human empathy as a driving force. We can see these are the people, and we have them everywhere in our world. I think we have more of them than we have sociopaths in our world. People who want to say, like, I want to make sure you eat. So if we can highlight them and give them, give them the remote control for the little RC car of our dreams, then it's pretty exciting, I think.
I agree, but I guess this brings me to the point I wanted to make about vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What's to stop a hostile government from just shutting down the power grid if they don't like a decentralization project that's happening? What's to stop a hostile corporation from saying, you know what? What's worth the incredible amount of computing resources we would need to dedicate to this? Making sure that you never, ever get decentralized, right? Like, you are an existential threat to our way of doing business, and we will dedicate all computing power necessary to shut you down, right? What's to stop people who have in this world of, like, really unevenly distributed resources, especially technological resources? What's to stop, the people who can control these things just by fiat, attacking?
Yeah. That's a very good point. And it is indeed a terror I dare not stare at sometimes, because this has been, we see this in the history of, like, my master's thesis was looking at the history of the tension between grassroots innovation and top-down surveillance and control since the beginning of the development of computers.
Right.
So it's certainly been a tango, back and forth, a horrifying tango. And I would say, as obnoxious as this might sound, that really the saving grace has always been that hackers stay a little bit smarter, that they stay a little bit quicker. And I think it's because they're it's the lean mentality of when you're in survival mode, you're not logged down with both of the abundant widespread resources, but also the, like, crushing limitations of bureaucracy and centralized power structures. Hackers are always going to stay innovative, and they're always going to be, thinking in a, like, Flatland style, thinking in a dimension that the centralized power structures haven't yet gotten to. However, when it comes to, I guess, we'll just base this on, since this is really the origin of the functional blockchain, like, tools we have now. When you base this in finance, like looking at finance and fintech, I do think they're catching up, and I do think it's going to be a real interesting couple of years in terms of the government making a real effort to shut down the freedom we see in cryptocurrency. There are a lot of things popping up right now with basically governments recognizing that these initial coin offerings that I mentioned and stuff like that, all these free-for-alls are basically, in their designations, really violating a lot of securities laws and stuff like that. And in some ways, those are protective of the small folk. Like people are getting exploited by these snake oil salesman campaigns. So yes, it's freeing to have this, like, diversified crypto economy, but government regulatory practices, I don't think they should be led by the government, but somebody needs to point a light at the exploitative nature of the wild west of finance here.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to, so I'm not particularly I'm not particularly excited by fintech, and I'm not particularly idealistic that the financial elements of cryptocurrency will escape some sort of, getting hammered into the ground with regulation. However, right. What I think is what I get excited about is the many ethereal, pun intended, projects around self-sovereign control of our identities and of flexible, modular, decentralized governance, because those are things that they're able to be maintained on small enough scales and in enough of, as I said before, a plurality that that communities can use these and kind of not pose enough of a threat in our lifetime to necessarily need regulating. However, that is kind of a depressing utopia, one in which we stay free as long as we're unimportant enough to escape recognition. However, you're
free to do anything as long as it doesn't bother, El Presidente. Don't wake daddy.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I grow increasingly kind of sadly what I'd call pragmatic is as I get older, and I do think that I think that is the strength of decentralization, is that sort of that splintering. Is the same thing that makes a system like Tor browsing effective. Like we have, and like VPNs in general. Like if we have enough of us running around, like it doesn't matter if you wake daddy if there's like 40 kids running around the room and he's trying to figure out, I can't blame any of them. Although daddy might be big enough to just take a bat to the whole room.
Right, yeah. I get that. And I remember I did a couple of InfoSec trainings after the election to be like, well, how are we going to exist in this increasingly oppressive world? And the answer was, listen, the more InfoSec stuff you do, the less suspicious anyone who does InfoSec stuff is. Exactly. Right? They can't arrest you for using a VPN if literally everyone uses a VPN, right? They can't, just, say that's grounds enough for suspecting him. But I guess what it comes down to go back to that issue of saturation, that's really concerning, right? Like, what's to stop? Like, if freedom becomes a conditional upon the owning of a computer, then all they have to do is take the computers away, right? So that's a real concern for me, and maybe that's not.
I can give that will kind of that actually shows how paradoxically blockchain technology circumvents that problem better than any technology approaches we have thus far. Is how your Bitcoin, for example, is stored. It's not actually anywhere on it. You interact with a wallet interface on your phone, or are you there? I can see your awesome profile picture. Mordecai. 1 second, anyone who might be watching. Well, darn. I'm not sure if I should like continue my point, or isn't that an awesome profile picture? Mo is the best. Whole computer froze up, says Mordecai. I will, while Mordecai is getting back on, oh, cool, it was. I will make a couple announcements that I was going to make at the end of this for cool events. One of which is, I guess I'll like look at the camera. One of which is the Startup Society Summit in San Francisco on August 11th and 12th, which is like 5 days from now or something. It's very focused on not just decentralization, the D10E, Decentralization Conference Network group is helping to put it on, but it's the Startup Societies Foundation focuses on how do we build autonomous societies, you know, seasteading islands and all sorts of stuff like that, self-governing communities. How do we do this in a sustainable way in the globalized age? So not only will that be going on, but the night of the 12th, we are throwing a decentralized dance party for them. So that's going to be pretty great. And for anyone who's interested in more of this stuff and going to be at Burning Man, we are building Camp Decentral at Burning Man, which will basically be a soapbox camp where we'll have speeches throughout the day from different pretty cool people in the decentralization community, trying to underline how all of these technologies are very much in line with the principles of Burning Man itself. Radical inclusion, participation, self-sustenance, community, etc. Let me see what Mo says. He says, you want to call it, we're approaching an hour. I thought we would each give our thoughts. I guess I will just finish then. What I was going to say to Mo's point about having to have technology is that your Bitcoin is not on your phone. You interface with your phone to access it. But where your Bitcoin is stored is actually a seed phrase of words that you have to memorize. And here's where the individual responsibility comes into the picture. There's no one, if you forget your seed phrase, you're not emailing Google to ask them to restore your wallet. It is entirely yours, and that set of information recreates the Bitcoin that you have. So how this approaches the problem Mo rightly brought up, and one of the biggest social good application examples that's given for this is the idea of a brain wallet for refugees. The idea that you can cross through, if you're forced to leave your home, you can cross through, you know, potentially dangerous territory where you would get robbed of your life savings. And what you have is a set of words memorized. And you should probably have every member of your family memorize it. You have a set of words memorized. And that is where your wealth is stored, is within your own mind. And at any computer, you can recreate this wallet from your seed phrase. So it is indeed getting towards the end. I was going to instill the tradition of each of us kind of saying something near the end, but I think he buzzed me. Let me see. Okay. I don't think he can rejoin. So I will just say that I'm hoping to do a write-up of how this structure can be used by others, and anyone can do so, because the more conversations like this we have out there about such a complex and emerging topic, the more well-rounded our shared vision of it will be. And I didn't get a chance to say, I think they should end with a compliment. And I didn't get a chance to say that one of the reasons I was so excited Mo brought this all up is because having grown up in a largely like Jewish community, I have found that all of my Jewish friends and their families have the most understanding of how socialism could operate. Like, I'm very much suspicious of socialism outside of this cultural tradition I see in kibbutzes and stuff like that. And actually, our shared friend, Dara, I went to her family's Seder a couple years ago, and they had structured the entire thing. They had restructured the reading of texts and stuff like that to acknowledge resource inequity in the world, to acknowledge all of the forms of oppression different people can face. And just, yeah, if there was one community that would give me hope that like we could have a functional operational form of socialism, it would be the community arising from the Judaic tradition. So you should definitely follow we'll have links to Mo's work, and yeah, thoughtful young man. And thank you y'all for hanging out. Hi, by the way. Decontrol, if you're ever in Vancouver, look us up, meetup.com/DCTRLVAN, Decontrol Van, or DCTRL.ca. I'm gonna stop broadcasting. I don't think he can join, but Mo is awesome. Friends for life. And viva la decentralization revolution.